So, Govan Law Centre is a campaigning organisation, and we've campaigned against a number of unsavoury practices throughout the finance and banking sector, and we routinely campaign on housing and on homelessness issues. The bedroom tax, as it's been coined, and don't let any of its supporters detract from the vileness of this legislation by telling you it's not a tax. It doesn't matter what it's called. They can call it the under occupation charge. It's an attack on the poor and the vulnerable. So I would ask you to always remind people of that. It doesn't matter what people call it. It's going to affect about 100,000 people in Scotland, 600,000 across the United Kingdom. Now, around 2/3 of the families that are going to be affected by the bedroom tax have a disabled person living in their household. I've got some figures here which Roddy's kind of corrected me on. So it was about over 5,000 people in the Edinburgh kind of city council area are going to be impacted by the bedroom tax. The Department of Work and Pension have been advising the government since February that should everyone who's been asked to move because they're so-called under-occupying moved, then there would be no savings made. I think it's also important to highlight that when this was going through the Parliament, the House of Lords put in a caveat to say that if anybody who's not been offered an alternative and decent move by their social landlord, then you can't get hit with the bedroom tax. And the government quite wrongly overrode that with some arcane parliamentary privilege for 1750. So the government are aware of what's happening. They've been told by lots of experts, including other folk in the political class from their own party, but they've chose to push through this legislation. What's going to happen with this is people are going to get £14 or £25 a week coming out of their pocket, and people sitting here and your neighbours and your families and your friends are going to have to prioritise whether you heat your home, whether you eat food, whether you travel to interviews, whether you can use hot waters for your showers, or whether you're going to pay your rent. I think that this is wrong. We keep hearing about scroungers from the Tories, but this is a bit of a fallacy because nobody chose to have a disability, nobody chose to have an autistic child, nobody chose to be mentally unwell, or nobody chose to be long-term unemployed. These are events that happen in a person's journey in life that they've had to deal with. The state's supposed to protect people like this, and this cut is taking £14 and £25 out of people's pockets a week. I think that that's quite an immoral attack as well. Govan Law Centre currently have a petition in at the Scottish Parliament asking that the Scottish Parliament use their powers to legislate and set aside only the element of the bedroom tax into ordinary arrears which can be pursued in courts. Now, that will still mean that people will have debts, but you can't be evicted for that debt. You can only be evicted for rent arrears or mortgage arrears. So if the rent gets set, that only the housing, the bedroom tax element is what we're saying the government should be setting aside, because we don't think that folks should just not pay their rent, but this thing has happened to them. They haven't chose to not pay their rent, they physically can't. This hasn't been overly popular in some circles, and I'm not here to make any kind of political gestures on that, but the fact remains that the Scottish Government have it in their power to bring this legislation in as an emergency interim measure to stop people from getting evicted from their homes. And I also want to make it very, very, very clear that nobody at Govan Law Centre or any advice agency would advise or tell anybody not to pay your rent, because if you don't pay your rent, you're going to get evicted out of your home. Individual housing associations and councils that run their own housing stock can also take a decision not to evict people for the bedroom tax element of their rent arrears. There's obviously going to be a cost to that because rental incomes are going to go down. But at the end of the day, it costs about £3,000 to evict somebody anyway. So that's a cost that they're going to have to put up front. Now, I'm not really great at math, right? But if you take that standard figure of £3,000 for an eviction, that's 214 weeks' payments that a person could be getting into their rent account instead of evicting them. And that's about 4 years or something like that, just short of it. So I'd also like to point out that I think that social landlords have a responsibility to their tenants, and that includes those who are falling in hard times. Nobody's choosing to have this bedroom tax hit them, but social landlords, some councils, some housing associations are saying, and maybe some of you guys in here have already had letters saying, get out, you're going to be getting evicted if you don't pay your rent, and asking you to sign documents to say that you've read letters. I think that that's quite unfair because everybody in the social landlord sector knows that this is an unfair tax. So if they know it's unfair, then why the hell are they talking about evicting their tenants? You didn't choose for this to happen. Tenants didn't choose for it to happen. But I do want to make it quite clear, though, that this isn't about turning against social landlords or councils. For this policy to be successful, the Tory government needs everybody to be fighting against each other instead of standing together. They need tenants to beat their landlords' throat, they need the councils to beat their tenants' throats, and all the while folk are no fighting what the real fight is, and that's the Tory government. I just want to talk a wee bit about the impact as what I see coming from a prevention of homelessness worker in Govan is going to be. People who've never thought they were going to be in court are going to have to turn up in court. People that thought they were never going to be homeless are going to be getting made homeless. The process with evictions, I'm not sure if anybody knows about this, is that if you build up in a rent arrears of 3 months, then your social landlord can evict you. That's what the law is. You get any less than 3 months and they can't push for the eviction for rent arrears. This can normally be resolved by an organisation like myself and Roddy's, because usually rent arrears happen. Maybe you've missed a payment 12 months ago, something's happened recently and you've missed another 2 payments. You can get them in, you can make a deal with the landlord and say, right, he's going to pay back, you know, £5 a week, £10 a week, whatever you can afford, and that stops the eviction from happening. And if it did go to court, again, these arguments can be put forward in front of a sheriff. The sheriff will decide whether it's reasonable, and 9 times out of 10, if you're paying your rent arrears off, they're not going to evict you. The bedroom tax does not give you the option to do this, because you're always going to have the £14 or £25 a week shortfall. I can't magic up money, neither can guys like Roddy or the other advice agencies. We can't combat this in the normal way that we stop evictions from happening, and that's why I think that this is quite a toxic bit of legislation. We've been told, and it's kind of, Roddy's already touched on it, that 500 million is the sum that we're told that this bedroom tax is going to save from the welfare bill, but I would dispute it, and so would many else working in the homelessness and housing services. If everyone that's affected starts putting in appeals to everything and challenging local councils and local housing associations and appealing every letter you get from them, then there's a cost to that, to the organisations that you're sending it back. Also to talk about the fact that a homeless family's journey from start to finish, from the eviction process to get into homeless accommodation to then finding another secure tenancy, costs about £20,000. Now that £20,000 comes from all different pockets, as Roddy touched on, but the £20,000 comes out of all your pockets, because that's taxes that's either going into the NHS or taxes that's going into social work. One concern that I've got, and other has an impact on homelessness, is what we'll have in people. There's a direct causal link between homelessness and risk-taking behaviour, poor mental health, taking drugs for the first time, developing alcohol problems, children missing school, criminal justice, and involvement in a whole host of other problems. Now, all these involvements, again, they cost money. Now, it might not be coming out of the welfare bill, but they're coming out of some bill, and that's coming out of taxpayers' money. So again, I would challenge on that level that this is not going to save any money. I guess can I get into the closing stages now, where the kind of what a response is that nobody's been evicted for the bedroom tax yet, right? It's not happened because it's not been there. It is likely going to happen over the next few months, because people will be sitting with rent arrears just now, maybe two months rent arrears, and then they'll get hit with the bedroom tax, which will hit their rent arrears even further. What's going to happen is that it can go to court, and I hope that anybody who is facing that will approach legal services and get the advice that you need. What we don't know is going to happen is that a sheriff can only evict somebody on grounds of reasonableness. Now, if you've put in for a move with your housing association for a smaller property and you've been hit with the bedroom tax and that's what's put you over the edge into being evicted, then an argument that a solicitor can make would be that is it reasonable to evict because the person has tried to move, the person hasn't been able to move, the person hasn't chose for these benefit cuts to happen to them, they've happened to them. To be honest, I don't know how that's going to pan out. I don't know if there's going to be a whole host of sheriffs acting independently based on a case-by-case basis, or if there's going to be a kind of general approach to this. And I'm not going to comment on it either, because I can see there's cameras filming me, so I just need to be careful what I say with that. But what I would say is that if these things are happening to you, please seek legal advice, because you need it. And you're entitled to free legal aid as well to be represented at court. One positive thing that's came out recently was that the government was going through a legal challenge to have severely disabled children. We're going to have to share rooms. Now, the government pulled out of that. They had set other solicitors up. They'd paid the money for it to happen, to be challenged, but they withdrew. Now, did they withdraw because of public pressure? it's possible, and that's why I'd like to say that, you know, in Edinburgh, in the 30th of March, there's a big march organised. The more people that come to the march, the more impact it's going to have. And just to kind of finish up, to say that, you know, tell your friends about this and your family and your colleagues about how unfair this is. People that support this policy generally support it on the grounds of that it sounds like a good idea. But when you start breaking it down and you start talking about what it's going to do, then it starts showing you, first of all, it's not going to save money, it's going to break up communities, it's going to do the opposite of what the Tories saying it's going to do, and all the while it's people that are going to suffer. So I would urge you to go to the march on the 30th and to talk to your friends and neighbours. And if you're worried about stuff, seek support from places like Roddy, because that's where you guys, I guess, would go. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.